Welcome to Insights as a Service. As always, every second week, I've got Nick with me. G'day, Nick.
Howdy, howdy.
So, I guess I should always point out the fact that this is going out on YouTube, on a YouTube channel, on Spotify. Both of those have got video, and we're also on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. But either way, please subscribe, like, whatever options they give you. Please do that. We crave your approval. Plenty to talk about this week, Nick. We got some opinion-y type things and also some product related news, some Microsoft news. Why don't you go f yourself and tell me all about swearing in the workplace?
Piss off. Yeah, no, it's apparently it's up. There's a report that came out actually sometime last year, but it says swearing is up 60% in the workplace, which is a massive increase. But
how do they measure that?
They've been analyzing call recordings. So I'm assuming they opted in for this type of survey, and someone perhaps pre-screened some of the conversations on there. I don't know the minutiae of that level of detail in the report. I'm sure it's fine printed somewhere, but yeah, it's predominantly management teams that are dropping the F-bombs and the explicits. But, I think, the question is it acceptable to use swear words or, controversial language perhaps in everyday conversation in the workplace?
I mean, it definitely depends on the swear word. I think there's just some words that you don't want to be dropping. Yeah, I think C-bombs are pretty just no. Just don't do that. But I think context is everything, as always with these things, is nuance, right? Like, I think if it's an upbeat, happy kind of a meeting, those swear words are going to just land in a totally different way to a heated, contentious meeting where you start dropping some F-bombs or, using a few shits, not physically, because again, that word can have many different uses. So not physically using shits, but you get what I mean? Like it's going to land differently depending on the environment.
Yeah, there's some great in context ways of doing it. It's like, I don't buy into the other thing. That's, to be blunt, would be, an acceptable use of the word fucked, I'd say, in the conversation. But if you were to say, like, pull your head out your ass and get on with the job, that might be taken very negatively by the person. Dealing
with that situation. Yeah, that's right. I guess there is still some risk, right? Like the article itself said that increased use of swearing in the workplace is a positive thing because it shows a willingness to be vulnerable in a way, which means that you're prepared to take risks around your coworkers, which means that you feel that you relate to them well. Either that or you're an angry person who just doesn't have a filter and is just firing off shots everywhere.
Yeah, there's probably followed by some slamming doors and aggressive exclamation points in teams. But yeah, it's definitely a more informal way. And I think, it does have a way of getting a point across, but also helping with hyping teams up, in that kind of casual sense if they're a sales related team. But yeah, I mean, I definitely drop them all the time. And I try and be conscious that I do them, but definitely sometimes, even I'd say, ooh, perhaps that was a bad one.
I think with swear words too, it's one of those things where the less you use a swear word, the more power it has when you choose to use it. If you're choosing to use it in like an authoritarian way or to make yourself scary in a particular moment, but the more they're used, the more you disarm them, I think. But what would be really interesting, and I don't think the article had it, but a correlation between the rate of swearing in a workplace and the retention rates, like the turnover of staff in those businesses.
Ooh, yeah. And the number of PGs that follow.
Yeah, perhaps. Absolutely. Yeah, there'd be definitely room for that. And I think that is the thing, right? It's a risk. And maybe that comes back to when you think about the scenario in which you may choose to swear, the bigger the group, I think the less advisable it is because you can't be sure of your audience.
Yeah, it's got to be like small teams, like, you kind of the 5 people you work with type of thing, not get up in front of the company and then drop some massive bombs.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly. It wouldn't see the right tone or messaging.
But see, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, where it was the Kaseya's CEO who fronted that town hall meeting with the new Datto employees who were brought on board. And he was just, dropping swear words left, right, and center. And I don't have a problem with swearing in the workplace, but I do think there are times when tensions are raised, people are looking for guidance and to be reassured, and you've got a wide range of people across, just with different backgrounds, different expectations, different ideas around etiquette. So probably in that environment, even if your personal style is quite blunt and quite brash, I think there's still, just like you kind of dress for your day, maybe speak to your audience.
Yeah, be relatable. I mean, if you walk into a room of angry shareholders and then you're just trying to play Mr. Be all nice and innocent, they're probably just going to get more riled up because they're not feeling like you're connecting. But if you dropped a few tactical words in there, kind of raised and matched their tonality and things like that, then you're going to have a far more, I guess, greater chance of walking away, perhaps on a more mutual standing point.
Yeah. I know that Andrew, our 100% shareholder at Lightwire and MD, he wrote a letter to all staff a couple of years ago, and it was just a bit of a working with Andrew, our expectations at Lightwire type thing. And at the end, basically said the key thing is just don't be a dick. And, that kind of set the cultural tone for, how we speak and what's acceptable. And we've kind of just run with that. And to date, no issues. But even like this podcast, right? Like we talk about, if we say shit, okay, leave it in. I don't think that's overly offensive anymore. Anything worse than that, F-bomb, anything like that, we bleep it out. Because, at that point, I think it's too open to interpretation whether or not that's okay. It probably doesn't sit well for me in a professional setting. I personally try and stay away from that.
No, I'd agree. And I think it depends on the market as well. Like Australia and New Zealand, they're, pretty affluent with their language. And I think, more conservative countries would be highly shocked if we were to go and drop some of that.
What does it mean when someone's affluent with their language? Does that mean they're rich with their language?
Yeah. Yeah, like, okay. Rich and just dropping, F-bombs into everyday language, or, as the Aussies like to use the C word quite a lot.
Yeah.
Comes in.
Probably related to the criminal past, I suppose.
Kiwis got bugger, like bugger for a long time.
Do you remember that, slight aside, but do you remember, you might be too young, but there was a Toyota ad in New Zealand years ago where that dog fell from a great height into the tray, and then the dog could apparently talk, and it said bugger. And the amount of complaints that came in to the Advertising Standards Authority, but they were all dismissed because apparently bugger was okay. And since that, anytime anyone's been offended by the term bugger, I'm like, look, the New Zealand's Advertising Standards Authority said no issue back in early 90s. So pretty sure it's fine.
Cutting edge swear word back then.
People complain about crazy things. But anyway, all right, cool. Yeah. Swearing in the workplace, yes, with whole bunch of caveats. Done. Cool.
Love it. What's next?
Next piece. So I was reading in the NZ Herald recently that the CEO of a startup called Working Spec, don't fully understand what they do, something to do with engineering or something. But the key thing about that story was, like every industry, there's a real shortage of skilled staff. And they were saying that at the moment they're getting around that by people moonlighting to a certain extent with them. And it just made me wonder if that's something we're going to see more of, and would employers elsewhere be happy to have someone who already had a job doing some, early or late evening work for your business as a second source of income, essentially?
I think you have to be somewhat objective looking at it rather than a blanket rule. How impacting is it going to be? Is it, a couple hours a week? Is it a little side hustle gig type thing? Is it some pocket change? Are you just having some fun? Are you learning new skills that you could apply to your job? There's a whole bunch of things that go into it, so I don't think it's like a black and white yes or no. But, I think if it was something that was going to be impacting to the primary job, I would certainly be quite concerned about that and probably going, this person can't really give it 100, 110%.
That's a good point, actually. I wasn't thinking about it from the, I guess what you'd call the primary employer's standpoint, the one that they're currently working with before taking the second job. I know that in America, particularly, you watch American, news or TV or just generally, pop culture kind of stuff. There's a lot of people in low income jobs who work 2 or 3 jobs to get by, and I assume working way more than 40 hours a week. But it's much less common, at least in my experience, in the professional services industries, that sort of white collar space. But you're right. My experience has been when somebody's come and said, "Hey, I've got a side gig, I've got a side hustle." To go, okay, you're an adult, you know what our expectations of you are in the role you have with us, and I would hope that you're mature enough that if you feel like you're taking on too much and you're burning out, you'll have an honest conversation with me around that.
Yeah, and is that somewhat of a hobby for them? Perhaps there's a disconnect from their day-to-day job, and that ties in quite well as a stress relief for something like that until it takes off. And then comparatively, if someone is like a super athletic person, perhaps they are trying to become a pro rugby player at the same time or something like that, and they're training super hard every day after work and just absolutely nailing themselves. Is that any more impacting than a part-time job as a cleaner after your shift?
That's, fair call. I think though, if you're working, let's say you're desperate for software engineers and you've got someone coming on who's doing a, I don't know, 8 till 12 type shift in the evenings, having worked a full day, put the kids to bed, then going back to it, it would have to be quite a transactional role, I think, because you try and get someone like that to really be a part of your culture, to really interact with others, to take part in sort of, training or other activities. You just can't, and they can't. So you'd have to have I have a specific transactional job that needs doing with a really clear definition of success. We estimate it'll take this many hours and off you go. It wouldn't be like they were a true team member.
Yeah, and you, depending on what it was, perhaps you might be worried about what are the health and safety implications. If you've got someone who's, essentially working 2 jobs and working well more than 12 hours a day, are they a forklift driver? Is that going to risk other people's in the workplace's safety when they come to work the next day, or perhaps day 3 when they're really tired because they're not getting 8 hours of quality sleep a night?
That's true. Yeah, I wonder though, is there currently some sort of a marketplace type app or anything like that for people who, aren't looking for a job per se, but they feel they've got additional capacity and they're in, high demand sectors, whether that's, network engineers, software engineers, whatever it is. I wonder if there is a place for people like that currently. I imagine there probably is.
I'm sure there would be. I mean, it feels like a more professional services version of Fiverr.
Yeah. And maybe there's already those same things on Fiverr. I just feel like that's more of a, hey, I've got a job, rather than this is an ongoing
task base.
Yeah, although maybe that's just the natural evolution of someone doing a really good job for you on something like Fiverr, and then you go, hey, you know what? If you got the resource, we've got the work. Off we go.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton of that because, a lot of the stuff you throw out onto Fiverr, you want it done to the same standard and kind of in the same way going forward. So you could get repeat business, which could turn into something if it's a decent sized organization.
Yeah. We had a sleep consultant come in to talk to our team. I don't know, at some point about a year ago, roughly. Who the hell knows? I say this every week, but I've lost all track of time. But they were saying, look, about 10% of people are like those historical figures you hear about. Like Napoleon famously slept about 3 or 4 hours a night and was fine. But a lot of people claim I can get by on almost no sleep. Is like, if you think that, you almost certainly are wrong. It's a tiny minority of people. And I know there's this whole sort of grinding to get ahead and, sleep when you're dead kind of a situation. And people glamorize that in a lot of cases. But I just think, if you are taking on a second gig, you still got to get somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 hours sleep a night, or you're just going to dig yourself an early grave and be miserable. So I think that whatever the situation is, whoever I was employing in whatever context, I would want to have some level of certainty that they actually had the space for that level of sleep in their life, because otherwise I'd be doing them a massive disservice.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that literally just jumped into my head then was having a new baby in your household. Like how disheveled do some people look when they come to work after dealing with that for the first few months? Remain.
Yeah, totally. Remain. I still think he looks like crap. He definitely hasn't recovered. It's been months.
Exactly. So, and that's akin to having a second job, right? So,
yeah,
it all comes with context.
Yeah. Oh, well, fair enough. We'll leave that one there. I was going to tell the story of how I actually got this job because I think, it's a relatively unique story, although maybe not as unique as I think, and that could be another talking point. But I might leave that to last because I think what we might jump into rather than an opinion piece, another bit is actually the news around what Microsoft announced at the Inspire conference. Was it 2 weeks ago? I think 2 weeks ago. They had the digital contact center announcement, and you have been nice enough to do a bit of a deep dive on that. So do you want to talk through what that digital contact center announcement covered off on?
Yeah, so that was Microsoft's announcement in July there. So the digital contact center is not a single thing, right? It's actually comprised of a bunch of Microsoft products all forming together to create a digital contact center. It's not, a SASE product that you go buy off the shelf. It's not Zoom plus contact center. It's not, any of those others. It's not, going out and buying Genesis. It's really working together to go, what do you actually need? So I'll break that down. So the digital contact center comprises of Microsoft Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement Center and Contact Center for Service. And then that kind of gives you your omni-channel experience and includes like the live chat, the SMS, the voice stuff in there. And then that's bolted in with a bit of Azure communication services to provide the underlying architecture to that. And then part of those Azure communication services is, like direct routing, which just comes via Teams, and that's how you get like the PSTN calling elements into the contact center. And then it's really leveraging, the Power Platform for a bit of low code, no code, or pro code, as they call it, customization. So that's really about building, your call flows, your interactions, and then leveraging some of the AI that they've got from their purchase of Nuance, and there to kind of do suggestive analytics and things like that. And things like kind of building out those call flows. So when we're talking contact centers here, you might be able to take payment card information or purchasing or linking kind of on website experience with proper full automation of, an agent real-time interacting with that person, processing it based on customer information and authenticating the person just by using their voice through the chatbot. So it kind of pulls all that together. It's quite a powerful platform that's going to come at a really big price, as you could probably imagine. But it's a tough one to also kind of go in and scope out as to how much that would actually cost. So for the majority of businesses across New Zealand, it's probably going to be a no-go because you're looking at a lot of per user, but you're also looking at a lot of consumption-based, and then you're probably looking at quite a significant project to actually implement this. It's going to put a lot of people off because it's a huge proof of concept to really get it up and get it all tested in there. And as well as kind of working out what those requirements you want to use and how you're going to take that data, analyze it, report on it. And it's got all the kind of stuff you'd expect from a contact center. So it's got, sentiment analysis. What else is in there? Sentiment analysis in real time. It's got real time transcription and translation, which I thought was quite cool. I'm not sure what languages, but I imagine it does kind of the majors: French, German, Spanish. It's got a bunch of macros in there. It's got agent scripting, speech to text, a whole bunch of extra smarts. And then you can also collaborate as a contact center with the other users in teams across the wider organization. So it kind of merges the contact center and the wider company together.
Okay.
So it's quite cool in that sense. And it's really, it's really about giving a cross-organization contact center that leverages all that same architecture underneath it that the rest of the company uses. So Power BI for reporting and a whole bunch of Azure storage and kind of documents to surface up from sales teams as customers have inquiries and things like that. Is
it kind of going head to head, or at least in part going head to head with AWS Connect?
In part, yeah, absolutely. But I think it's more, ultimately, it's more driven around you're a Microsoft user. Everything on your shelf is Microsoft. It's your company's stack. Why not just expand on that, keep that ecosystem together, and kind of get more economies of scale as you already pay for some of the licenses. Potentially, you're already paying for Dynamics already, so this is just like a small add-on with a bunch of other bits. But then you're rolling it out to a wider set of users.
So which what does the ideal client look like for them for this product? Do you think is it a true enterprise organization with 100 plus contact center seats, or?
Yeah, it's massive organizations with either a heavy service focus or they have a perhaps a distribution-based business as well, or kind of a joint business around that. So there's that, they want to bring in that kind of omni-channel experience, so that deep interaction between people on a website, engaging with them as they move through that website, being able to kind of initiate calls with them into that, and out again, and help people transact those kind of orders through as they go through the sales process, but then being able to kind of spin stuff off into support and kind of pull them back through again. So it's really the super large organizations that have enough bums on seats to be able to really drive and support that.
Have we got a release date for it, or is it already live in its various forms?
It's kind of live in its various forms already. There's no it's still quite limited information around it out there. There's just the usual marketing craft that's been put out by everyone. But, it's one of those ones where most people, if they're going to go for it, they're going to have to do a lot of research. They're going to probably bring in a lot of consultants. It's not just going to be, a single team rolling this out. It's going to be a magnitude of cross-organizational involvement, probably vendor involvement, and then, again, a whole bunch of licensing conversations to be had depending on the licensing structure that people work with.
So would the advice, I guess, for MSPs listening be that if you've got a customer who is currently using Teams calling particularly and has the requisite scale to make this of interest, really perhaps to go and scope out the functionality and see if it solves any real problems for their customer?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's piecemeal as well. So you can kind of take the minimal components if you need, but again, it's heavily hinged off Dynamics. So if you're not looking at Dynamics, or you've been put off by the price points of that, which is I think either $50 to kind of $100 a user per month, that is going to kind of steer your conversation if you've got those contact center requirements. So again, pulling out of Teams calling and moving into a more dedicated focused contact center. I will just say that they did make this quite a smart decision as they evolved this product. Was it does integrate with, I think it's Genesis, Avaya, and a couple of others as well, because they realized that people aren't just going to swing over to this overnight. So they wanted that kind of integration, and then eventually just pull people across onto the platform, which I thought was quite a smart strategy.
Yeah. It's an interesting space, the contact center space at the moment. Most of the UK's platforms have now understand that, probably have understood for a while, that that's where the value add is. That's where the decommoditization of the UCaaS platform is. It's not in the minutes, it's not the lines, it's the features, and the efficiency it can add to business and the experience it can add to the customers of the people they're trying to sell to. It's not a direct head-to-head comparison. They're very different in different ways, but Zoom has a contact center feature coming out in NZ and AU apparently by the end of the year. It's been live in North America for some time now, and all indications are that's looking good, and they're ready to roll that out. So for those using Zoom Rooms and Zoom Phone, that's going to be quite an interesting option.
Yeah, that'd be quite cool. And again, that's a good example of a kind of a sassy off-the-shelf version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a whole ecosystem around that, right? With your Zoom integrators, etc. Something I'm getting my head around more as we have chats ourselves with Zoom. The other thing that's kind of interesting, just off the back of that Microsoft announcement, is sort of a lesson in being a fast follower, not necessarily first out of the blocks. We saw that Microsoft had changed Teams calling to Teams Phone a number of months ago. And so we thought, better stick with the...
I think almost a year now.
Yeah, there you go. So we weren't that fast, but we were too fast still. So we changed, our search words and our AdWords campaigns to really focus on aligning our terminology with the vendor terminology, that being Teams Phone. And man, that was a mistake. The inbound leads dried right up. We were clearly not aligned in terms of our search words with what people were actually searching. Microsoft might have been calling it Teams Phone, but the general market was still very much calling it Teams Calling. So a lesson in how not to market there.
Just too cutting edge sometimes.
Yeah, we were. But yeah, look, I might save my story time for another day. Anything you want to cover off on before we wrap up and let me get myself off to Europe tomorrow for 3 weeks?
Oh, look, I'll let you go on vacation. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
What, a couple of years since you've been to France?
Has been 3 years. 3 years. We were going to go, and then COVID kicked in, so that was off. And then it's been a couple of years. So yeah, France, Ireland for a wedding. My mate Dermot, I'm sure he listens to every episode, but he's getting married over in the south of Ireland. So we'll get over there. I'm sure that'll be a quiet couple of nights. Don't think I'm going to come back super recharged, but that's okay. Worth it. So yeah, but we've got enough episodes in the can that we're not disrupting our flow of awesome comms to our lovely listeners. So all good on that front. Nick, we'll leave it there. We'll let you get back to work. Thank you everyone for listening. Remember to smash that like button and subscribe on whatever you're listening to us on. And we'll catch you next time.